stay tuned. I'm here with the coach, John Brent.
I'm here with the vet and Griffin on a very important day.
It is. Today is Martin Luther King's holiday.
Great American.
Great American.
Man, no doubt.
And there's 70 years ago, 60 years ago, somewhere around there. It's been 60 years ago. This man, for many, what I remember growing up as in a small town East Texas, this was the pinnacle of what represented Black America that was not really written in history books except for this guy right here. You didn't read a lot about, when I was a younger kid, about history that had a lot of Black Americans in there, hardly at all. And then if you think about this, probably the most famous person from the 60s who had a worldwide legacy is MLK, Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, no doubt. And Martin Luther King is one of my heroes. I've read a lot about him. I understand his significance in the history of our country and the plight of the Black people would not be where it's at today without him. And the way that he did it was not only a peaceful way, but it was a great example of how anyone, if they want to get their message across, it's an example of how you should do it and take advantage of that First Amendment, to the right to protest, the right to assemble, and get your thoughts put out there when you don't think something's right.
Yeah, and I will say this is, there's a quote from him, and I will butcher it up, but how it resonates with me is, a person should not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the character of that person.
Man,
and that's powerful, because no matter who you are, what you are, no matter where you're at, what you look like, or whatever, it's just how you are as a person, is how you should be judged.
Yep.
Is your character itself. And I think that's extremely powerful.
I think it's powerful not just from a teaching standpoint of what Martin Luther King said in a famous statement, but I think it's significant in how we should have our society.
Yeah.
If a person, doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, doesn't matter where you start and where you end, it's how you act, it's who you are. I teach a class at the college, and we talk about who you really are as your character, is what you do when people aren't watching. But the character thing is huge. It shouldn't be that you're Black or white or poor or something. It should be who you are and how you treat other people. The character of who you are and the character of how you treat other people. It should be what life's about.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things I want to bring up about him early, before we get too far into it, is where he came from. I mean, he came from the Atlanta, Georgia area, but he was a pastor. And, me going to seminary, he went to seminary, or he got his religious degree in divinity, but he was a third generation. Just think about this. He's a third generation Morehead graduate. His father and grandfather went to Morehead. You have to think about that. If I remember correctly, he graduated in the late 1950s. So you can take that back to, somewhere to the early turn of the 20th century, when his grandfather probably went to Morehead University. That was a great example that his family had for him too. And then he went to Boston University after he went to Morehead, which is in the South. He went up north, and that's where he met Coretta. She was at a music school there, and they met in Boston. And of course, everybody knows Coretta King and Martin Luther King. But anyway, that's kind of a little bit back of where it came from.
So one of the things that I'll say is he's famous for "I Have a Dream" speech, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
And with that speech, that wasn't the first time he gave it.
Mm-hmm.
It's famous at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington that he gave it there. But I cannot remember for the life of me where he gave it before. And but that was not the first time. So I will tell you, other than doing podcasts, when I've had to give speeches, I will say that when I give a similar speech over and over, I get better at it. So it was probably on his game when he gave it at the Lincoln Memorial by far. I will say that. And then just some things that may not be known is, he was a Nobel Peace Prize recipient.
The youngest at the time.
Yes. And with that, though, is when he won that Nobel Peace Prize, his name became international real quick. And because of that, back to what I referred to is people in Germany, there are Martin Luther King, streets in Germany. You think about that and you're like, wow. Now, they're not in every town, but you can go to some cities and you can like, hey, that's an American guy,
Exactly.
and so that's the power of influence that he had, or not really influence, it's just the power of his character that not only did America, who was facing racial discord and inequality, but the whole world recognized his efforts. And I think that's just, to be quite honest, other than, and I think his is more powerful than that and is recognized even further. But the only one I can even think comes close in these 60s that has any quote whatsoever would be JFK. Yeah. And I don't even think it's comparable. I think Martin Luther King's quote, as far as being recognized, either I have a dream speech or judging a person by their character, is way up here. And I think JFK's, not to diminish it, but it's down here on the scale compared to him.
Yeah.
And that just shows you the reach that his message had. And I think that's powerful.
Well, as a history teacher, a United States history teacher, there's two things every year that's in my curriculum for the week of Martin Luther King, or for Black History Month and Martin Luther King, is Selma. We watched the movie Selma, which is an amazing movie if you want to see it. We also talk about the plight of what happened in Selma, Alabama, and then walking all the way to the Capitol and giving that great speech there. A lot of people forget how amazing that was because they tried to go, they were beaten, and they went again. And it was kind of like we were on our way at that time. But the letter from Birmingham jail, if you've never read it, it's kind of like, in a comparison way for me as a person that studied religion, is Paul being in prison talking about how he's learned to be content in all circumstances, but he's being chained to a Roman soldier. I mean, that's such an amazing thing when you're going through a trial to remember, hey, but at least I'm not this bad. And his letter from Birmingham jail, the way he was beaten and put there, and what he wrote, he was not bitter. What he wrote in that letter was a seminal letter for civil rights, the civil rights movement. That, when my kids, it doesn't matter if they're white, Hispanic, Black, when they read that, there's always one or two every year that are just amazed at his not being bitter and just keeping his eye on that prize of peaceful getting from one place to the next. It's absolutely amazing. So
one thing I will say is when I think of Martin Luther King, and I talked about his reach, but one thing I will say is there's a simple question I got when we have discord in America and things of that nature. In modern day America could take some lessons learned from him by far. At the end of the day, my simple question to do when there is discord and how the venues they use to choose to express the discord is, what are you doing to move the ball forward? And to me, what I read about him was he always moved the ball forward in an effort to bring everybody together. Yeah, and the other civil rights leader at that time was a different person with Malcolm X, and he wasn't about the peaceful. He was about more of the violent part. And Martin Luther King, and they had a disagreement of that. And which you look back in history, who do you think brought the ball forward more? Was Martin Luther King with his peaceful way of doing it, because he realized we can keep doing this all we want to as Black Americans, and we're only going to get to this spot. Yeah. But if we can get the white Americans on board with us, then we're going to take it this way. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to do it in a peaceful way. Right. And it worked. Right. I agree. And so, Coach, I just thought we should recognize this day because I think it's important. It's not just important to America. It's not just important to Black America. It's important to the world because America is not the only place that has racial inequality by far. And he's reached all across the world. And so I think it's important that we recognize this gentleman whose life was taken way too short. Yeah. And imagine what impact he'd had if he had lived a full life. My gosh, what he did in the few years that he lived is more than most of us have ever done. Yeah. On how he influenced. So I just think that I think we should take back and sit back and recognize that. And we'd like to hear what your thoughts are in regards to Martin Luther King and this holiday.
Yeah, two things I just want to hit before we get off. You're right. The 60s took three of the greatest leaders all within a 5-year period. JFK, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy were all assassinated within a 5-year period. And look what we talk about now in our country and what's gone forward with JFK, MLK, and RFK. That, I mean, it's such a terrible time. But what happened because of their sacrifices, the civil rights movement that Kennedy wanted, JFK wanted, Johnson signed it. What Martin Luther King wanted, he cost him his life, became part of our culture. And I will have to say this, you said that about around the world. I didn't think about that. I didn't know if there was a street anywhere outside of America. But name one other person that has more streets named after them or more schools named after them in this country. I don't know of any. Yeah. That lets you know the influence he's had on our country. And that, like you said, it's just been 60 years.
Yes, it's not, when I look at the date, less than 60 years. It's
yeah, exactly.
And that's insane. And a powerful person, and our hats off to him,
yes, sir.
And his family by far. So shoot us what you think of this, and shoot us what your thoughts are on MLK, because we want to hear it. So from the coach
to the vet.
Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned.